Okay, go on.
I followed your one link, and it went to a bunch of people dancing around in, I think, a wedding, bar mitzvah or something.
Oh, on the channel?
Yeah,
I sent that out?
yeah, I think you sent it out as a link to the last week's class or something like that. And I was like,
Oh, no.
that's interesting.
Okay.
And
Tell
then
me
I
which one,
clicked on
Sam.
your name, and so got back around to,
Oh, but you got what you wanted?
yeah.
Oh, okay, fine. Oh, it was, yeah. It was set up. I set up this thing for our son's wedding. He got married right at the beginning of COVID. So we streamed it. What, Lev?
It was also part of God's plan.
Yep, there you go. Thank you. All right, let's go.
You're good, Ori? Back. You're breaking up.
I'm not organized because a minute. You guys start and I'm just listening,
Fine.
and
Okay.
I'll be
Yeah.
fully joined in 5 minutes. I'm sorry.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Let's
me
go.
too. I'm gonna get plugged in also in 5 more minutes, and I'll be able to help read as well.
Okay, fine.
Mirza Hashem.
Okay, go on, Jason.
All right, so part 5, the principal and secondary aspects of the Jewish people and their connection to the higher worlds. Rabbi, I will now teach you another fundamental principle, note 76. In this chapter, we'll be looking at the divine sustaining force, its relationship with the emanations that act upon the world, and its relationship with the lower worlds themselves. The sustaining force actually has 2 different aspects within it, each of which receives from the active emanations in a different way. One of these aspects is more fundamental in this world than the other. These 2 aspects are reflected within the existence of the Jewish people. We too have 2 aspects through which we connect to the higher worlds and draw down blessing, one more fundamental than the other, as will now be explained. Back to the text. The Jewish people have a source of holiness that belongs to the entirety of the holy nation by virtue of being part of the nation of Israel. This applies even to the sinners among them. As is proven by the statement of our sages, even though a Jewish person sins, he is still called Yisrael. The source of this reality comes from an extremely high level, from the fact that God is the direct source of the Jewish people. As the verse says, my soul said, God is my portion, therefore I will always have hope in him. Note 77, this verse refers to the time just after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, when the people began a bitter exile. Nevertheless, the verse states that we will never lose hope in God despite our sins, because God is our portion. We can never lose our connection with him. Nevertheless, back to the text. Nevertheless, the extremely vast and extensive system through which God runs every element of the created world, for good or for bad, does not depend on this aspect of the Jewish people's existence. Rather, it depends on their actions, each person being judged according to his deeds. It emerges that there is one general aspect of the Jewish people's existence that does not have many immediate consequences or details. Although it is from a very high level, it is not the main factor affecting what happens to them. There's another aspect of their existence, which is the principal one. This aspect depends on the divine service that has been entrusted to them. Every element of the vast and profound system that governs their day-to-day existence is linked to this aspect. Note 78. There is a part of every Jew that is very elevated, and remains connected to God regardless of whatever he does and however low he falls. This gives him the ability to return to his true spiritual source and heritage, even if all seems lost. However, on a day-to-day basis, this aspect of his relationship with God does not dictate what happens to him or how connected he actually feels to God. This depends on his day-to-day deeds and thoughts for which he is judged. This aspect of our connection to God and our ability to receive from him depends on how much we actually strive to come close to him. It is the more fundamental aspect in this world. The first, more concealed aspect is a permanent background effect, but is more tangible and much less immediate.
Okay.
Back to the text on page 529. It is also important for you to know that the cycle of days and weeks follows a specific pattern, as will be explained in more detail later on, chapter 10, part 1, God willing. Note 79. We will now see how these two aspects of the Jewish people's existence relate to the different influxes that come into the world during the cycle of days and weeks. Back to the text. The main part of the week is Shabbos, while the rest of the week is just a completion of what stems from Shabbos itself. Each Shabbos, a new spiritual influx is brought into the world. On the other days of the week, this influx produces secondary influxes according to what is needed for the entire creation on each particular day. Each of these secondary influxes is precisely measured out and will vary according to its position in the cycle of time. Furthermore, the main part of each day is in the morning, while the rest of the day is a completion of the new influx of that morning. Note 80. Secondary influx for each separate day is further subdivided into a principal aspect which comes to the world in the morning, and a secondary aspect which continues and completes this influx into the afternoon and evening. For this reason, the morning prayer service is much longer and requires more effort than the afternoon and evening services, which only have to complete what was already drawn into the world during the morning services. They complete this influx according to the specific characteristics of the afternoon and evening. Back to the text. The lower worlds, as represented by the Jewish people, draw down the main influxes of Shabbos and of the morning through the main aspect of their existence. The secondary influxes are drawn down through the secondary aspect of their existence. Note 81.
I could read if you want. Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay,
Okay.
you want to do the notes? Fine.
Yeah, sure. Note 81. Influx. This is amazing. I was just talking to my wife about the Zman and how the spirit is different for Shacharis. And then by the time then afternoon comes, it's like a different time. It's different.
Yeah.
All right. Note 81. Influxes are drawn down into the world through the Jewish people, who are the essential element of creation. The principal spiritual influx of the week is drawn down on Shabbos, and the principal spiritual influx of the day is drawn down in the morning. It follows that these primary influxes will be received by the principal aspect of the Jewish people's existence mentioned above. Secondary spiritual influences are drawn down in the afternoon and evening. It follows that these secondary influences will be received by the secondary aspect of the Jewish people's existence. Above, it was stated that this secondary aspect of the Jewish people is actually from a very high level, but does not relate to our daily needs, deeds, and divine service. Wow. Yet here and in the next paragraph, we see that it does relate to our divine service and that it is considered to be a lower level. The answer is that this aspect of the Jewish people in its true elevated essence does not reveal itself in this world. That will only happen in the future world after the world has been perfected. In the meantime, it only relates to the world to the extent that it is required by the other aspect of the Jewish people, which relates to our deeds and divine service. Therefore, for the moment, it is inferior and it functions only to complete the influxes drawn down by the other principal aspect. However, even now, in its essence, it is extremely elevated and maintains our link to the hidden world of perfection.
Mm.
Any questions? By now, everything is perfectly clear. I see exactly what you mean, Rabbi.
Okay.
So back to the text on 529. This goes without saying, since everything follows a parallel pattern, like with like, the type of influx with the type of receiving capacity and the type of action with the receiver of the action. You should understand that God, who is elevated, exalted, and totally beyond our comprehension, brought into existence various types of holiness that emanates from him down to the lower worlds. 82.
Note 82. We will now see how the two aspects of the Jewish people's existence relate to the different influxes of holiness that are drawn down into the world by the actions of the righteous.
Even this holiness bears no relation to his intrinsic holiness, which is concealed and beyond our comprehension. Rather, it is something relative to the state of preparation of those who will receive it. Even within this holiness, there are obviously different levels, since we can find one type of holiness greater than another. For example, there are sacrificial offerings of greater and lesser holiness. Now, God is continuously bringing about new rectifications in the entirety of creation according to the arousal of the lower worlds, as we explained. Note 83.
Note 83. In the previous paragraph, we spoke about changes that occur in the divine influxes due to inherent changes in the weekly cycle of time. Here, we are talking about changes that occur only because of the preparatory efforts of the righteous to create a suitable situation for higher levels of influx and holiness to come into the world. We will see that in this area, a similar parallel pattern of influx with receiver also holds true. The principal rectifications of the righteous, which draw down the principal influxes of holiness, take place through the principal aspect of the Jewish people. The secondary aspects of the rectification take place through the secondary aspect of the Jewish people, as will be explained.
Each rectification requires that all the preconditions necessary for its completion and the completion of all that it must bring about have previously been fulfilled. 84.
This refers to all that we learned earlier in the section concerning how the divine glory comes down to the world through the divine service of the Jewish people, which connects the lower worlds to the higher worlds.
All this is achieved by the creatures of the lower world becoming attached to God. However, in order for one of the main types of rectification to come about, the main element of creation, the Jewish people, must become attached to God through the main aspect of their existence, namely through their more important aspect, upon which all of existence depends. 85.
See first paragraph of this section.
They will then draw down from above the powerful and essential influx needed for the particular rectification that is being brought about within them. However, to complete the remaining elements of that rectification, the attachment to God need only be through those aspects of their existence that parallel the level of these remaining elements that need to be completed. This is clear according to the principle of parallelism and different levels that we mentioned. 86.
The end of previous paragraph.
Kohanim, who offered the animal sacrifices before God, the daily offerings in their appropriate order, and the additional festive offerings according to their laws, needed to know all the things that we have been discussing about how they vary according to the different times of the day and the week, as we explained. They needed to know the level of attachments of the lower worlds to God. 87.
That is the principal aspect of the Jewish people's relationship with God, or the secondary aspect and the subdivisions within these.
Level of divine favor being revealed to them. 88.
We learned in part 3 of this chapter that the ability of our divine service to perfect the world depends on the power that God renews within us continuously. The level of this power depends on the extent to which we are able to arouse God's favor toward our divine service.
The sort of influx being drawn down. 89.
That is a principal influx or a secondary influx in the subdivisions within these.
And how all this varies according to the cycle of time and the particular needs of the moment. 90.
All these factors change depending on the cycle of time, morning or afternoon, Shabbos or weekday, Yom Tov, etc. They change according to the particular nature of the moment: drought, famine, war, prosperity, abundance, and times of greater or lesser spiritual elevation among the Jewish people, etc. We have now concluded our examination of the sustaining force that gives existence to the lower worlds, which we began at the beginning of this chapter. We have seen the nature of this force, part 1, how it relates to the divine emanations that act on the world, part 2 and 3, how it relates to the lower worlds themselves, part 4. This has involved us examining the nature of the lower worlds, part 1, their relationship with the higher worlds, part 2, and the partnership of the righteous with God in perfecting the world, part 3. It has involved us seeing the way the divine glory connects to the lower worlds through the service of the Kohanim in the base of Mikdash and the rectifications of the righteous, part 4. Finally, in this section, we have seen the two aspects of the sustaining force as they are represented in the two aspects of the existence of the Jewish people, part 5.
Okay. Very good. Great stuff. Fantastic. I recommend you read the summary on page 534. But we must go on. Chapter 9.
All right, I have to step away for a moment. So Ori, are you there? Can you read the footnotes? No?
Jason can too. Well, I can.
All right, I should be able to be back in a quick moment. I just need to check on the Kinderlach situation. I'll be right back.
Okay. I mean, we could,
Amongst
since it's
yourselves
just
if you want,
us.
but
Yeah,
I'll
well,
be right back. I'm sorry.
Jason, what are you making of this? I'm actually gonna just pause our video.
Chapter 9.
Okay,
Okay, page 543, part 1. In order to perfect the world, evil must first intensify. Rabbi, with God's help, I've now finished explaining what you need to know about the system of reward and punishment. 1.
In chapter 7, we began to describe the system that God uses to run the world during the 6,000 years of history when evil needs to exist for the purpose of man's task of serving God. The system functions according to our deeds. In that chapter, we spoke about the way the system of forces acts upon the world, and in chapter 8, we spoke about how these forces are received by the creatures of this world. As mentioned at the beginning of chapter 7, there is another system that acts on a more hidden level, guiding the world to its eventual perfection. This latter system does not depend on our deeds. It will now be described.
We're on page 543. Or he froze again.
Oh, yeah, he must have a bad signal.
oh, there he is. Okay. Ori,
Page
מה קורה עם
543.
הווי-פיי הלילה?
כמו בכל הלילות.
מה נשתנה? Okay, we're on 543 in the right at the top, actually, just after note 1.
Now we need to explain the second system of divine guidance that we mentioned earlier, beginning of chapter 7, part 1, which works in a hidden way, directing the entire creation towards its ultimate perfection. Note 2.
Note 2. The second system has already been described in chapter 3. However, there we spoke in terms of the way God acts upon the world in order to guide it inevitably toward absolute perfection through the total destruction of evil. In this section, we will speak about this system from man's point of view, how it affects our individual destiny, and how it can cause the righteous to suffer and the wicked to prosper, based on a note by Harav Chaim Friedlander.
Okay, good.
In this process, we will clarify a concept that our sages have mentioned. Everything depends on the divine decree, Mazal.
The system guiding the world to its inevitable perfection is not restricted by our actions. It is based on the way God, in his infinite wisdom, arranged creation. Only he knows what is needed in order to bring about this perfection and what part each soul plays in this process. He alone decrees what will happen in the world and to each individual in order to bring this about. This system is called mazal, a term derived from the Hebrew word nozzle?
Nozel.
Nozel, something that flows down from a higher level. This expresses the idea that these
The truth
decrees.
is, it's also a nozzle, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's exactly what a
Wow.
nozzle is. Okay.
Right. Wow. That's unbelievable. This expresses the idea that these decrees are decided above and are imposed on man from above, even if he does not necessarily deserve it.
Interesting. So it's a divine flow independent of human action. I like that. Right. So
Student.
Mazal Tov means like, yeah, it's an interesting way, right? It's basically saying that this wasn't dependent on you.
You have mentioned something that I greatly wish to understand, since it is one of the topics that I find very difficult. 4.
I'll read it. It's very hard for the student to understand how it can be fair that God's will decrees things that we do not necessarily deserve. Why should it be decreed that one person suffers and another does not, when their actions are equally righteous?
Therefore, I would very much like to hear a complete explanation of this subject. Rabbi, that would involve an understanding of why good things happen to one righteous person and bad things to another equally righteous person. However, that is something which cannot be known.
Oops.
Note 5.
Although we will learn on a general level why there are some righteous people who suffer and others who prosper, cannot be known why one particular person was chosen to suffer and another one was chosen to prosper.
Student, if it is something you cannot explain, why did you draw my attention to it in the first place? Rabbi, there is a point up to which we can understand, but beyond which we cannot investigate. What I'm going to explain to you will be sufficient to resolve any questions you might have about this subject. You will see how everything is perfectly just. Whatever cannot be known, we will not even attempt to investigate. However, you will see that whatever cannot be known does not disturb one's faith in any way or cause one to become confused. You will see for yourself that it is just extra knowledge that is not essential. But we are more than able to clarify everything necessary to put one's mind at ease and refine one's faith. God did not make anything so disturbing to a person's faith that it is impossible to find the answer to it. The proof of this is that the Torah commands us, you shall know today and feel in your heart that God is the only power in the heavens above and the earth below. Barim 4:39.
6. God commands us to strive to achieve a clear understanding of his oneness and total dominion over everything that happens in the world. It follows that it must be possible for us to see how everything is an expression of the divine will and in no way contradicts our faith in him.
Student, if that is the case, tell me everything that you know I need to understand. Rabbi, based on the system of reward and punishment that God put in place, each person should be rewarded according to his deeds, good for good and bad for bad. However, God's hidden system of divine guidance is directing the whole creation towards the point where everything will be only for the good and evil will totally disappear from the world. Note 7.
Based on this system of reward and punishment, evil could exist forever, operating within the boundaries of its function of punishing the wicked. There would be no need to destroy it, as explained toward the end of the section. However, God's hidden guidance of the world ensures eventually evil will be totally destroyed. Text.
This process involves the rectification and refinement of the Hanhaga.
That is the system through which God runs the world. It is not that God uses one system to guide the world while evil exists and will then replace it with a new system when evil will be destroyed. Rather, that same system which allowed evil to exist for the time necessary will lead to the destruction of evil and the perfection of the world. It will refine itself into a system that gives rise only to good, as will now be explained.
The best way this general rectification actually comes about needs to be based on the root cause behind the existence of good and evil. When one wants to completely cure someone of an illness, it is necessary to discover the root cause. Once the cause has been treated, the effect will be removed. So too in our case. In order for everything to be only for the good, Without any element of evil, it is necessary to identify what causes the current existence of evil in the Hanhaga. Based on this root cause, it will be necessary to direct everything in a way that the desired result will emerge. The system will no longer contain within it any element of evil. This internal method of rectification is self-evident since God does not change his mind, like a human being who regrets what he has already done, abandoning one course of action in order to adopt another one. Note 9.
We cannot say that God made the world in one form with evil contained within it, and then, when evil is no longer needed, he will use some external force to destroy it, like someone who designs a system and then destroys it because he has had enough of it. Rather, the forces and the processes through which evil is destroyed and the world perfected are already in operation from the very beginning. Text.
I guess how would you explain the flood with that one? It's almost like he's sort of, and oh, whoops, that was a little much. Here's this rainbow. Like, no.
It's a good question. Interesting, Shiloh.
Yeah,
Halacha l'maisa.
yeah, it must be that was built in. What he's saying is that was built into creation. Should mankind get to that level, this would happen. And something happened in the flood that it would never happen again. The Tevunot says that God weakened the world, actually. It was a much stronger world before the flood. And that's why they were able to sin so badly. So he said, well, God weakened the world, so no generation would be able to do that much bad. Or people would not be able to do that much bad. But yeah, you need to read it, in a deeper way than it presents.
Rather, based on the original set of principles themselves, he directs the entire world towards the point where it will attain the perfection he wants. I've already discussed, chapter 2, part 3, the root cause behind the existence of evil within the Hanhaga. It is there in order to bring about the revelation of God's oneness. This is because it is necessary to create evil and allow it to do everything within its power. When God then transforms this evil into good, the unlimited power of his oneness will be revealed. Therefore, the more God conceals his presence from the world and allows evil to reach its maximum potential, thus bringing the world to the very brink of destruction, the more powerful will be the subsequent revelation and demonstration of his absolute oneness. This will come about when he uses the power of his absolute sovereignty to rectify all the damage that has been caused. The divine light will be recognized from within the darkness, as we have already explained. Note 10.
When God's absolute sovereignty overcomes and destroys evil, this demonstrates that nothing can oppose God's power and that his is the sole power in the universe. The greater the evil that is destroyed, the greater is the demonstration of his power and oneness. This complex subject was explained in detail in chapter 2, parts 3 to 5. Back to the text.
We have learned that God wants to transform the Hanhaga so that it will contain only good. He therefore needs to base his Hanhaga on the aforementioned fundamental principle of the revelation of his oneness, which is the cause of the present existence of good and evil. Note 11.
We were given an analogy above that is necessary to treat an illness by dealing with its root cause. In that case, having discovered the root cause of the illness, we need to cure the person by removing that root cause. However, in our case, the process of the revelation of God's oneness is both the root cause of evil and simultaneously its cure. We do not need to remove this process of revelation to cure the problem of evil. On the contrary, we need to allow the process to complete itself. That is because this process of revelation requires the existence of evil only as a temporary phenomenon, as the darkness from which the light of God's absolute oneness will be revealed. The completion of this process is through the destruction of all darkness and evil.
When God runs the world through the system of reward and punishment, this does not cause the evil to reach its maximum strength. Under this system, evil only comes upon those who are evil. Those who abandon God are destroyed, but those who seek out God are protected. What causes evil to reach its maximum strength is God hiding his presence completely from the world. Note 12.
At this point, we need to know an important preface. In chapter 7, part 2, we learned about the system of reward and punishment. We learned that when we sin, God punishes us by hiding his presence from the world, with the result that his judgment is not carried out. Consequently, evil becomes very strong. Even the righteous suffer, and the wicked are able to gain ascendancy. Yet here, the Ramchal states that all this only happens because of the system guiding the world to its inevitable perfection, a system that ignores our merits and sins. He states that according to the system of reward and punishment, there would be only good for the good and bad for the bad, and evil would not become very strong. The answer to this seeming contradiction is as follows. The Ramchal means that if the only system guiding the world were that of reward and punishment, then whoever sinned would be punished and whoever did good would be rewarded, and evil would be contained within defined limits. In chapter 7, he described the system of reward and punishment as it ends up being affected by its interaction with the fundamental underlying system guiding the world to perfection. Because of this interaction, when man sins, the system of reward and punishment ceases to function as it should, allowing the wicked to prosper and darkness abound. From this darkness, God prepares the necessary rectifications to perfect the world and remove evil from existence. In the same interaction that causes the gradual and inevitable development of God's judgment of the world in 5 stages, as described in chapter 7, part 3, the nature of this interaction between the two systems will be described in detail in chapter 9, part 3.
You
About
summarize
such a
that?
time.
You summarize that, Lev?
I don't think so. I
Uh,
don't think so.
Jason, you want to try?
I'm having a hard time just like using my voice, talking so much. I gotta go drink something while you try to summarize it.
I guess there's at least so far, it's two systems. One that, like, if you do good things will happen to you. If you do bad things happen to you. But that isn't sufficient for the entirety of the system. And then, so there's this underlying, more powerful current that essentially is moving the world towards a final state where there is no evil. But to accomplish that, more evil has to be injected or has to become more powerful in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, yeah.
Is that what you get from it, Reb Nitzon?
Yeah. Yeah.
And sort of, I guess this is we're going to learn why, like, bad things happen to good people.
In a general way, because that's really the problem here, right? The fact that reward and punishment doesn't work properly is really what bothers us.
That it doesn't work
Properly.
properly.
Fully. Yeah. Good. Good things should happen to good people. Bad things should happen to bad people. That's the end. Nothing else should ever happen. But this other force, which is actually leading the world to true perfection and the destruction of evil, actually sometimes means that when a person does evil, when a person does bad and they increase evil in the world, that actually is allowed to kind of take place. the way he says is that God kind of hides his face. So that's counterproductive, because that means that the more evil that's done, the less God is around. And how on earth is that gonna, that allows the evil to prosper and bad things happen to good people. So I'll tell you another way of asking the question. It's in this very esoteric book called The Juggler and the King. I don't know if you ever saw it, but the sages of the elders of Athens asked, it should be a good book to follow up with. The elders of Athens asked one of the rabbis, it could have been Rabbi Yeshua, I'm not sure, and said to him, listen, it doesn't make sense. You're telling us that God has sent you into exile because of your sins. But your sins in exile are worse than when you were in the land of Israel. So what's the rectification? It's not a rectification. It's just making matters worse. So, that's somewhat the same question. Sometimes does the justice system, of even giving evil to the evil, does that not enhance evil sometimes? Lev, you're muted.
But we learned that sometimes it enhances it just so that it can be further destroyed somehow.
Right, that's what we're going to say. It leads to the ultimate, it's part of the ultimate revelation. Okay, let's see. He's going to explain it to us.
Wow, I got to go back and reread chapter 8.
Okay. Go on, Jason. Where are you?
I will not answer. Sorry, about such a time it is said, when they call me, then they call out to me, and I will not answer.
That was after note 12? Okay, fine. Yeah.
Yeah. About such a time it is said, then they will call out to me, and I will not answer. The truth has disappeared, and he who avoids wrongdoing is considered a fool. The sole purpose of this total concealment of God's presence is to bring about in a subsequent stage the complete rectification of the world, as it is written in the next verse. He saved them through the power of his right hand and supported them through pure generosity. According to this way of running the world, no attention is paid to the individual merit or guilt. The system simply follows its own rules, allowing evil to grow strong in order to demonstrate after that the unlimited power of good. As long as evil is in ascendancy, even good people must endure the suffering that evil causes, not because they deserve it, but because that is what the time demands. Nevertheless, when the force of divine good becomes revealed and assumes total power, they will receive their full reward for all the evil they had previously endured, as is written, "Gladden us according to the days you afflicted us, the years when we saw evil." But as long as the evil is in ascendancy.
I just want to say, so it's it sounds like, it's someone, you could be a righteous person, but you're on a boat that's sinking. It's not going to, you're also going to be part of the sinking boat. You don't deserve it. No, you don't. But that's, the time, as he says it, the time deserves it. Will you be, and the good news is you'll be recompensated, right? Because you didn't really deserve it. You were just caught up. So then, okay. So then you get some reward according to that. Okay, furthermore.
All right, but as long as evil is in ascendancy, their merits will not help them escape from it. As the verse states, therefore, at such a time, the wise person will remain silent, for it is a time of evil. Furthermore, since it is part of the nature of evil to bring about all types of destruction and to wipe out any semblance of order, not only will the merit of the righteous not save them from evil, but the very opposite will come about. The wicked will prosper and succeed in whatever they do, while the righteous will be oppressed and downtrodden. Thus our sages described, in the prelude to the Messianic era, insolence will abound. The wisdom of scholars will be scorned. Those who fear sin will be despised, and the truth will disappear. The verse itself that we brought above also describes the situation. The truth has disappeared, and he who avoids wrongdoing is considered a fool. Note 13.
We have now begun to understand on a general level why the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper.
Thus, if God wishes to direct the world through the system that reveals his oneness by revealing the light from amidst the darkness and transforming evil itself into good, he must allow evil to intensify while ignoring the merits of the righteous. In fact, those who do evil rise to the top, and the righteous are trampled in the dust. After that, his absolute sovereignty will be revealed, with the result that evil itself will be transformed into good. There will be no more evil in the world, only good. Only then will the righteous receive their reward. Note 14.
During the Messianic era, evil will be destroyed and God's oneness will be revealed. After that, all life will briefly return to dust before resurrection. There will then be what's that?
Where did you get that from?
You mean the guy that wrote the notes? How did he pick up that?
Yeah. Where did the dust come from?
I don't know. Maybe it's
Yeah. Okay.
isn't that what's supposed to happen? Like we turn, but it's already like
Yeah. Keep on reading. Keep on reading.
I don't know. Yeah. Then there will then be a day of great judgment. Then when those who are not worthy will be destroyed. After that begins the process leading to the world of eternal reward, where the righteous will bask forever in the radiance of God's presence. See the section on the Geula in the Ramchal's Ma'amar Hal-Karim.
Karim. Mhm.
Karim.
On the other hand, were God to run the world purely through the system of reward and punishment, sorry, did I skip something? I may have skipped.
Amen.
Nope, I didn't. Sorry. On the other hand, were God to run the world purely through the system of reward and punishment, there to be good for those who are good and bad for the bad. But there will be nothing that would bring about the complete rectification of the Hanagah, since evil would not be destroyed. Why, after all, would it be destroyed, considering that it would only affect the wicked? It would be limited in its sphere of influence, not being able to do as the evil nature dictates, but only what it is supposed to do. Since God truly wants the complete rectification of the world and the total destruction of evil, he chooses to deal with the righteous according to the system we mentioned that leads to the revelation of his oneness. Therefore, their righteousness will not help them escape from the sufferings of the world. This is definitely not because of the system of reward and punishment, but in order that through them, the world will become completely perfected. This is certainly advantageous to them, since they will receive a greater reward than they would have purely based on their own personal merits. Note 15.
Not only is the suffering of the righteous necessary for the perfection of the world, but it is also of benefit to the righteous themselves, since it increases their reward when they accept what happens to them with perfect faith. Their reward is also increased due to the fact that they bring about the rectification of the world. Tlalim Rishonim, 34. Wow.
However, it is also advantageous for the world, for if God would conduct himself towards the righteous only according to the system of reward and punishment, the benefit of their good deeds would just be their personal reward. Their actions would not bring about the removal of evil from the world. 16.
According to the system of reward and punishment, if a person overcomes his negative inclinations and does good deeds, he acquires merit and reward for himself. If he falls prey to his baser instincts and sins, he makes himself liable to punishment and suffering. His good deeds principally affect himself and do not help bring about the ultimate destruction of evil.
But since their suffering is not because of their own deeds, but as a result of the Hanagah, the benefit is not just for themselves in terms of their own personal reward, but also for the entire Hanagah. In their merit, God's oneness is revealed and evil is removed from the Hanagah. 17.
God has set up the world in such a way that when we do a mitzvah and act righteously, he causes a revelation of his light and oneness to come into the world. The greater the mitzvah and the righteousness, the greater the revelation. The greatest righteousness is for a person to remain firm in his faith in God's goodness and oneness, even when he is suffering terrible travails, not due to his deeds. It is the display of tremendous righteousness that causes God to bring about the ultimate revelation of his oneness and light. Moreover, if a person is suffering for his own sins, the suffering serves only to atone for the evil he himself has caused and to remove it from the world. But if a person suffers because of the divine decree, this atones for the evil and darkness that is already in the Hanhaga, and it removes it from the world.
In fact, this
Said
gives
once,
rise to
it's like a stepping stone. It's used to give you a challenge or be the friction necessary in order to have that faith.
In fact, this gives rise to a further advantage. Even the revelation of God's affluent sovereignty will be through merit and not completely undeserved. Even though it will be undeserved as far as the rest of humanity is concerned, for the righteous it will be deserved. 18.
This may be illustrated by the following parable. A father promises his two children that he will give them a wonderful present as long as they do what he says and don't complain about anything that happens to them in the coming week. During that week, he makes them go through all sorts of difficult trials. After a while, one of them has had enough and starts to complain and stops doing what his father asks him, while the other accepts everything in good spirit and does not lose faith. At the end of the week, the father gives them the present anyway. However, for one, it is deserved, and for the other, it is undeserved. See, however, next note.
Because of the good they do, good will be bestowed upon the entire world. As a result, the whole of the Jewish people will have a part in this merit. 19.
Since the Jewish people are all considered as one interconnected group, we do have some sort of share in this merit by transference. For example, when a son is honored because his father is very important, he feels that he is not totally undeserved and that he has some share in this merit. Rav Chaim Friedlander, Sifsei Chaim Emuna, Behashgacha, see page 228, note 18.
End of part 1.
All right. You got energy for part 2?
I probably don't.
Sorry?
Sorry, I probably don't. Actually,
Yeah, he's been reading a lot, and it is kind of late, and you guys did get started early.
Yeah, okay, so let's call it a day here.
Yeah. All right,
Call it a
gentlemen.
day. All right, fantastic.
keep having this thought of like somebody of us being in like people being in a canoe on the Mississippi or something, and you can paddle around and do things, and you'll be rewarded by moving towards some goal or whatnot, but you're still being swept downstream at an ever increasing rate with ever larger amounts of water and power. I don't know, the end is your Gulf of Mexico, I guess, where the Caribbean lies and nice islands and stuff like that. So
there you go. Yeah,
lots
I
of
like
tasty
the
fish.
parable. I like it. All right, great, gentlemen. Thank you.